It is a Tuesday afternoon in late June. The thermometer on your back porch reads 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside your house, with the central air conditioner running full blast since 7 this morning, the thermostat says 76 degrees, and the unit has not shut off in 3 hours. You open the electric company's app on your phone. Your projected bill for this month is $243. Last month it was $180. The month before that, $155. And because every weather forecaster in America is saying it, that this is going to be the hottest summer on record. 150 million Americans are in the middle of a heat wave right now. 1 in 6 households is already behind on their electric bills. Cooling costs across the country are projected to be the highest in 12 years. Half the country is choosing between groceries and air conditioning, and the central AC unit running in your living room is the single most expensive appliance in your house. Now, I want you to sit with this. Stop and think. There is a setup you can build in 3 minutes using 2 materials that cost less than $2 total that drops the temperature of any room by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit with no electricity, no moving parts, no monthly subscription, no licensed contractor, no air conditioner of any kind. Just water, fabric, and 4,000-year-old physics that every dry climate civilization on Earth figured out independently long before mechanical cooling existed. The chemistry is real, the history is real, the setup works. And the only reason most Americans have never heard of it is that nobody in the cooling industry profits from teaching folks how to cool a room with a bucket of water and a wet sheet. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish and I farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Our farmhouse has no central air conditioner. It never has. 300 years of Pennsylvania Dutch farm families have lived through summers like the one outside right now, using exactly the methods I am going to walk you through today. The headline 3-minute setup that works in any house in any state, and the 3 supporting old farmhouse methods that compound the effect. By the end of this video, you will know how to cool your house this summer without running your AC at all for half the day, and you will save somewhere between $300 and $500 over the season doing it. Quick word before I get into it. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book at eliasyoder.com. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. Now, the 3-minute setup plainly. The chemistry of evaporative cooling, plainly. Before I walk you through the setup, you need to understand why it works. Because the chemistry tells you what to expect and what not to expect. Understand this. When water changes from liquid to vapor, what we call evaporation, it absorbs an enormous amount of heat from the surrounding air. Specifically, every single gram of water that evaporates pulls about 540 calories of heat energy out of the air around it. That is real high school physics. It has not changed in 4,000 years. And it is the most efficient natural cooling mechanism that exists on this planet. To put that in everyday terms, 1 pound of water evaporating from a wet sheet hanging in your window pulls about 1,000 BTUs of heat out of the air passing through. That is the same cooling unit your central air conditioner uses to measure its output. A wet cotton sheet is producing real, measurable, documented cooling power without electricity, without machinery, without a single moving part. This is why your skin feels cold when wet skin meets a breeze. The breeze accelerates evaporation off your skin. Every drop of sweat that evaporates pulls heat out of your body. The same chemistry that cools the human body cools the air passing through wet fabric. This is the principle. Air passes across a wet surface. Water evaporates. Heat leaves the air with the water. The air on the far side of the wet surface is measurably cooler than the air that entered it. This is not a folk remedy. This is thermodynamics. The story of how Americans stopped knowing this is not a conspiracy. It is plainer than that. It is the same pattern I have shown you with home canning, with lard rendering, with homemade yogurt, with everything we cover on this channel. When something works perfectly without you paying for it, nobody has a financial reason to teach it to you. In 1902, an engineer named Willis Carrier invented the first electrical air conditioning system in Brooklyn, New York. By 1955, 1 in 4 American homes had mechanical AC. By 1980, more than 60% did. And with each year that mechanical AC spread, the inherited knowledge of evaporative cooling faded further from public memory. The HVAC industry in America today generates over $240 billion in annual revenue. Central AC installation costs $7,000 to $15,000 upfront. Annual electricity costs run $1,000 to $2,000 per household. Filter replacements, refrigerant recharging, and maintenance contracts add another $500 to $800 per year. That is real money flowing to a real industry every summer. A wet sheet in a window costs nothing. It produces no recurring revenue. It cannot be sold back to you on a monthly subscription. And so the industry that grew up around mechanical cooling had no reason to teach you about the chemistry it was replacing. And folks gradually forgot over 2 generations that water and cloth had been cooling human homes for 4,000 years before electricity arrived. This is not a conspiracy. It is a system nobody had to coordinate. Every household that bought an AC unit and stopped teaching their children about wet sheets at the window contributed to the forgetting. And here we are now, paying $200 a month for a problem that a bucket of water and an old cotton sheet would have solved. Let me show you plainly that this is not invention. It is recovery of lost knowledge. I am going to give you 4 verified historical traditions that used evaporative cooling, every one of them documented in archaeological records and academic research in ancient Egypt around 2500 BC. Wall paintings show Egyptians hanging wet reeds and wet linen across doorways and window openings. Howard Carter, the archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, documented in his field notes that Egyptian burial chambers and palace ventilation systems maintained interior temperatures 15 to 20 degrees cooler than the outside air, using nothing but evaporation and natural airflow. Egyptian palace architects built entire wind channels designed to push hot, dry desert air across wet linen panels before it entered royal living rooms. From 400 BC onward, Persian architects built towers called badger, or wind catchers, that rose 30 feet or more above palace and home roofs. The tallest wind catcher still standing in the world is in Yazd, Iran, over 33 meters tall, more than 2,000 years old, and still functioning today. Researchers from multiple universities have measured interior temperatures in Yazdi's traditional wind catcher buildings during heat waves, with outdoor temperatures over 108 degrees Fahrenheit. The interior temperatures measured between 72 and 78 degrees. That is a 30-degree natural cooling difference maintained by architecture and evaporation with zero electricity in Mughal India during the 16th century. Emperor Akbar's summer palace at Fatehpur Sikri used wet-woven grass mats called kus screens placed in window openings. Servants poured water over the screens continuously through the hot afternoons. Interior temperatures dropped 15 to 20 degrees below the outside air. Indian summers that regularly exceeded 115 degrees Fahrenheit were made bearable inside the palace using nothing but water, grass, and the steady evaporation of moisture into the incoming air. And the Pennsylvania Dutch tradition from the 1700s onward is the one I know best, because it is my own. Pennsylvania Dutch farmwives hung wet sheets across kitchen windows on the hottest summer afternoons. My wife Esther's grandmother had a small wet linen panel she would tack across the kitchen window when the cooking made the room unbearable. The breeze coming through the screen cooled the kitchen by 10 to 15 degrees. Folks kept a bucket of well water in the kitchen on summer days, and the cool earth temperature of the well water added to the cooling effect. This is documented in Pennsylvania German farm diaries going back 200 years. In the modern era, real verified research, not internet stories, confirms this. In 1986, researchers at the University of Arizona built a passive evaporative cooling tower in Tucson, Arizona. The performance data from that experimental facility became the foundation of evaporative cooling tower design guidelines that engineers still use today. The tower produced sustained 10 to 18 degree cooling in Tucson's dry desert summer with zero electricity. 4,000 years of human civilization figured out the same answer. The chemistry has not changed. It is just sitting in your linen closet right now, waiting to be remembered. Now, I am going to show you exactly how to build this 3-minute setup in your own home, step by step, and exactly where to place it to get the maximum drop in temperature. Let us lay out the materials you need for this 3-minute setup. The entire list will cost you under $2 if you do not already have these items sitting in a closet or a cupboard. First, you need 1 bowl or bucket of cold water. Any container that holds about a gallon will do. A ceramic mixing bowl from the kitchen, a clean 5-gallon plastic bucket from the shed, or a large metal pasta pot. Cold tap water is perfectly fine. If you happen to have ice on hand, throwing a handful into the water accelerates the cooling effect for the first 30 to 60 minutes. But plain well water or tap water is what our families have used for centuries. Second, you need 1 or 2 large cotton towels or old cotton bed sheets. Old bath towels that have grown thin from years of washing are actually perfect because they hold water well without being so heavy that they block the air entirely. If you use a sheet, make sure it is cotton or linen. Understand this and understand it clearly. Synthetic fabrics like polyester, nylon, or microfiber will not work for this. Synthetic fibers are essentially plastic. They do not absorb water into their core, and they do not release it steadily through evaporation. They drop the water right onto your floor and choke out the breeze. Use natural fibers that know how to breathe. Third, you need a window with a cross breeze. This means a window where air is naturally pushing into the house, or a window directly opposite another open door or window across the room. If the air in your room is completely stagnant, the setup will still work, but you will need to assist it. A small, simple electric box fan, or even a battery-operated unit placed behind the wet fabric, will do the work of a natural wind. It takes very little movement to trigger the chemistry. Now let us walk through the build. It takes 3 minutes from start to finish. Step 1. Set up your cross ventilation. Go to the side of the house that is currently in the shade or receiving the breeze and open that window. Then, open a window or a door on the opposite side of the room or hallway. We want to create a clear highway for the air to travel. Step 2. Soak your cotton fabric completely. Submerge the towel or sheet into your bowl of cold water until every inch of the fiber is dark and heavy with moisture. Now, wring it out just enough so that it stops running in streams when you lift it. It should be damp to the point of being nearly saturated, but not dripping all over your floorboards. If you are working over a linoleum or stone kitchen floor, a few drips are nothing to worry about. Step 3. Hang the wet fabric directly across the open window frame. You can drape it over the existing curtain rod, secure it with a few thumbtacks into the wooden trim, or use spring-loaded tension rods. The sheet must stretch flat across the opening like a screen. Stop and think about this detail. If the sheet is wadded up or doubled over, it creates a thick wall that completely blocks the incoming air. If it is dangling loose and flapping wildly, the air passes right around the sides without touching the damp fibers. You want a single flat layer of wet cotton that forces the incoming air to filter directly through the damp weave. Step 4. Place your bowl of water directly underneath the hanging sheet on the floor or the windowsill. As the hot air passes through the sheet, the moisture evaporates, pulling the heat out of the air and leaving it cool as it enters your living room. At the same time, the standing water in the bowl below evaporates upward into the stream, doubling your active surface area. That is the entire setup. 3 minutes of work, $2 or less in materials. The air arriving on the inside of that sheet is now measurably cooler than the air outside. But I must give you an honest limit here. I will not mislead you like the folks selling expensive machines. The success of this method depends heavily on the moisture already in your air. If you live in the dry regions of the American West or Southwest, places like Arizona, Colorado, or New Mexico, the air is thirsty. It will drink the water out of that sheet rapidly, and you will see a massive temperature drop of 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit within 20 minutes. If you live in the moderate humidity of the Midwest or the Mid-Atlantic, the cooling will be steady, around 6 to 10 degrees. If you are down on the Gulf Coast or the humid Southeast, where the air is already heavy like a wet wool blanket, evaporation slows down. You will only see a drop of 4 to 6 degrees. But even there, a 5-degree drop for zero cost is a relief when the alternative is a utility bill that breaks your bank. The sheet will dry out every 2 to 4 hours in a dry climate and every 5 to 6 hours in a humid one. Re-wetting it takes 30 seconds. You simply pour a little water from the bowl back over the top of the fabric while it hangs, or take it down and dunk it again. Now, if you want something more permanent, a setup that does not require re-wetting every few hours and can be moved from room to room like a portable air conditioner, there is an enhanced version of this 4,000-year-old physics. It is called the two-pot pot-in-pot cooler, or a Zierpot. It runs on the exact same thermodynamic principle, but it holds its cold for 16 to 24 hours on a single fill, and it acts as a natural radiator of cold air that you can place right next to your bed or your workspace. To build it, you need 2 unglazed terracotta flower pots from the garden center. One must be large enough to hold the smaller one inside it, with about an inch of empty space all the way around the sides. It is critical that these pots are raw red clay with no shiny glaze or paint on them. If they are glazed, the moisture cannot weep through the clay walls and the system fails. You also need about 10 pounds of common coarse sand and a gallon of water. First, take the large outer pot and plug the drainage hole at the bottom with a cork or a wad of cloth so water cannot escape. Pour an inch of sand into the bottom of the large pot, then set the smaller pot directly on top of that sand, centering it. Now, fill the remaining 1-inch gap between the 2 pots completely with the rest of your sand, tamping it down with a stick until it is firm and level with the rims. Next, slowly pour cold water directly onto the sand ring. The sand will drink it up. Keep pouring until the sand is fully saturated and a tiny bit of water pools on top of the sand layer. Finally, place a flat piece of wood or a ceramic plate over the opening of the inner pot to seal it, and drape a damp cotton cloth over the entire top of the unit. Within 30 minutes, The water from the sand seeps into the porous clay of the outer pot and begins evaporating into the room's air. As that water turns to vapor, it pulls the heat directly out of the inner pot. The inside of that smaller pot will drop down to 55 or 60 degrees Fahrenheit and stay there all day long, even if your living room is 85 degrees. It becomes a small, non-electric refrigerator where you can keep your milk, butter, and vegetables from spoiling, while the outside of the pot radiates a constant, noticeable curtain of cool air into the room. These two setups are the foundation. But in our community, we do not rely on just one trick. We use a series of old farmhouse rhythms that compound these effects, working together to lock the heat out of the house completely. The first of these supporting methods involves a space that most modern homeowners treat as nothing more than a storage room for old boxes. I am talking about your basement or your cellar. Here is a truth most Americans have completely forgotten. Ground temperature below 4 feet stays between 50 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit year-round across most of the United States. While the sun is beating down on your shingles at 98 degrees, the earth just a few feet below your foundation is maintaining a natural, cool peace. Every traditional Pennsylvania Dutch farmhouse built over the last 3 centuries was designed with a stone cellar directly beneath the living quarters. That space was never just a dark hole for storing canned pickles and potatoes. It was our family's daytime retreat during the brutal heat of July and August. My wife, Esther's grandmother, spent her afternoons from noon until 4 o'clock sitting down in the cellar. She would bring her work down there, snapping green beans, peeling apples, sorting dried lavender, doing all the quiet, necessary chores that would otherwise make a hot kitchen unbearable. When the men came in from the team and the fields at midday, they ate their dinner quickly upstairs, then headed straight to the cellar floor to nap on simple woven mats for 30 minutes before heading back out to the sun. If you have a modern basement, you are sitting on an untapped goldmine of natural cooling. Even if it is finished with drywall or remains raw concrete, that space is likely sitting at 65 to 70 degrees right now without a single watt of air conditioning running. Stop trying to fight nature by forcing a mechanical AC unit to cool a 2-story house from the roof down during the hottest hours of the day. Instead, move your life downward. Shift your daytime activities to the basement. Set up your workspace, your children's play area, or your afternoon reading chair downstairs where the earth is doing the work for you. By retreating to the cellar during the peak heat hours, you can turn off the upstairs AC entirely for half the day, saving hundreds of dollars a season while staying perfectly comfortable in the cool lap of the earth. This leads directly into our second supporting method, the cross-ventilation lockdown rhythm. This is the single most effective non-electric climate control system ever devised by old farm families, and it requires nothing more than a basic understanding of daily temperature cycles and a few window latches. Understand this. Cool night air is entirely free. Even during a severe summer heat wave, nighttime temperatures across the majority of the country drop into the 60s or low 70s. The air outside your home at 3 a.m. is almost always cooler than the air trapped inside your house at 3 p.m. The old folks knew how to harvest that night air and trap it like a physical resource. The rhythm is simple, but you must be disciplined about it. At sundown, usually between 8 and 9 o'clock in the evening, you must open every single window in your house. Open the ground floor windows on opposite sides to create a draft. Open the upstairs windows. Open the cellar doors and the attic vents. If you have a simple box fan, place it in an upstairs window blowing outward to actively exhaust the stagnant daytime heat and pull the crisp, heavy night air through the lower floors. Let this free cooling run all night while you sleep. By 5 a.m., the interior of your home, the plaster walls, the wooden floors, the heavy furniture, will be thoroughly chilled down to 62 or 65 degrees. Then comes the critical step. At sunrise, before the sun can touch your walls, you must execute the lockdown. Go through the house and close every single window tightly. Drop every blind, pull every curtain, and shut the doors to the cellar. You are sealing the house like a thermos bottle. The dense, cool air harvested overnight is now trapped inside, and the thick walls and shaded windows act as a barrier against the rising outdoor heat. If you maintain this lockdown strictly, your home will remain at a comfortable 72 to 75 degrees until late afternoon, long after the outside thermometer has crossed 90. Our third supporting method is strategic shade. Direct sunlight hitting your house is not just light, it is pure radiant energy. On a clear summer day, direct sunlight delivers roughly 1,000 watts of energy per square meter. If you have a standard 10 by 10 foot south-facing window with the sun streaming through it, you are effectively letting a 9,000 watt space heater run at full blast right in your living room. Your air conditioner has to consume massive amounts of electricity just to fight that incoming solar load. The old farmhouses were never built out in the open without protection. We planted tall deciduous trees, like maples and oaks, specifically on the south and west sides of the house. In the summer, their thick green canopy blocks the sun entirely, keeping the house in deep, cool shadow. In the winter, they drop their leaves, allowing the low sun to pass through the bare branches and warm the home for free. We also built deep front porches with wide roof overhangs to shade the lower windows when the summer sun is high in the sky. On the western walls, where the baking afternoon sun hits the hardest, we grew thick climbing vines, like grapes or hops, on wooden trellises to create a living wall of insulation. You can apply these exact principles to a modern suburban home this weekend. If you cannot plant a mature tree today, install simple exterior awnings or solar screens over your south and west-facing windows. Understand this. An interior blind helps, but once the sun's rays have passed through the glass of your window, the heat is already inside your house. You must block the sun before it hits the glass. Using a simple canvas awning or a heavy mesh solar screen on the outside of your window eliminates up to 80% of that radiant heat before it ever enters your living space. When you combine all of these pieces, the 3-minute wet sheet setup, the portable clay zir pots, the strategic basement retreat, the night cooling lockdown, and exterior window shading, something incredible happens. The methods compound. Each step makes the next step easier. By blocking the sun, your house stays cooler longer. By locking in the night air, you start the day with a cold foundation. And by using the wet sheet setup in the few windows you do open for a breeze, you drop the temperature of the incoming air without spending a single penny on electricity. This is how our people have thrived for 3 centuries without the cooling grid. And it is exactly how you can reclaim your budget this summer. Open your windows tonight at sundown. Close them tight tomorrow at dawn. Hang that wet cotton sheet where the breeze meets the glass and watch the old knowledge work for you. Let us look at the honest math of this plainly. The average American household spends somewhere around $784 just on summer cooling costs. By leaning into these 5 coordinated steps, you are not just tinkering with a minor folk trick. You are actively dismantling that bill. Families who practice the night cooling lockdown and strategic window shading alone report cutting their central AC usage by 40 to 60%. In a dry climate, where the wet sheet setup and the clay zir pots reach their full thermodynamic potential, you can often turn the mechanical cooling system off entirely for months at a time. That is a real, tangible savings of $300 to $500 left in your pocket before the autumn frost arrives. Over 10 years, that is $3,000 to $5,000 that stays with your family instead of flowing to the utility company. But I must speak to you with total candor about the boundaries of this knowledge. These traditional practices are laws of nature, which means they are bound by geography. If you live in the arid west, the high plains, or the desert southwest, you are the prime candidate for this system. The air out there is empty of water. It acts like a sponge, drawing moisture out of the wet fabric and clay pots, so fast that the temperature drop feels almost magical. If you live in the east or the Midwest, where the humidity is moderate, you will still get immense relief. But it must keep the air moving with cross breezes or small fans to keep the evaporation steady. Now, if you are down in the deep humidity of the Gulf Coast or the coastal southeast, where the summer air feels thick enough to chew, the wet sheet method will hit a natural wall. It cannot drop the temperature by 15 degrees because the air is already saturated. Yet, even in those heavy, damp climates, the night cooling lockdown rhythm and exterior shading will still cut your utility bill by 25 to 35% by preventing your house from turning into a solar oven during the day. It is still meaningful. It is still worth doing. Stop and think about why these methods are not printed on billboards or featured in evening news segments. There is an entire infrastructure that relies on your forgetting. The mechanical cooling industry is built on a loop of recurring expense. The initial multi-$1,000 installation, the monthly power bill, the seasonal filter changes, the technician visits when a compressor fails in July. A bucket of well water and an old cotton sheet from the closet do not require a maintenance contract. They cannot be packaged, branded, and sold back to you as a monthly subscription service. And so, the quiet, effective solutions that kept generations of our ancestors alive and comfortable are left to sit forgotten in old farmhouses like mine. But you do not have to participate in the forgetting anymore. Reclaiming this self-sufficiency does not require a massive lifestyle overhaul. It begins with small, deliberate actions. Here is your task for tonight. When the sun slips behind the trees and the air begins to turn crisp, go around your house and open every window. Set an alarm on your phone for 5 minutes before sunrise. When that alarm sounds tomorrow morning, go back through each room, drop the latch on the windows, and pull the heavy curtains closed. Observe how long your home holds that deep, clean night chill before the heat of the afternoon can penetrate your walls. You will see, without spending a single penny, that you have already altered the climate of your home. Later this week, when the afternoon heat begins to build, find that old cotton bath towel or sheet. Soak it down in a basin of cold water. Stretch it flat across your open western window, where the sun is threatening to bake the glass, and place a simple bowl of water underneath it. Sit near that window and feel the air as it passes through the damp fibers. You will feel the exact cooling power that the architects of ancient Egypt and the farmwives of Lancaster County relied upon for centuries. And if you have a yard, no matter how small, look at the southern and western exposures of your house this weekend. Think about where a young maple, an oak, or even a simple trellis of climbing grapevines could go. What you plant in the earth today as a small sapling will become a massive natural green shield that guards your home from the sun for decades to come. Tell me in the comments below, what does your electric company charge you to stay cool in July? And which of these simple traditional methods are you going to put to the test in your own home this week? If your own parents or grandparents had their own ways of beating the heat before the era of modern central units, whether it was sleeping out on a screened porch, keeping a damp handkerchief wrapped around the neck, or retreating to a cool stone cellar, share those family memories below. This inherited practical knowledge is exactly the kind of heritage that slips away forever if we do not talk about it and write it down. I read every single comment you leave. Next time we meet, since we have now covered how to keep the house itself cool without relying on the power grid, I am going to take you inside our kitchen. I am going to walk you through 7 traditional cold meals that our family prepares during the dog days of summer. These are hearty, time-tested Pennsylvania Dutch recipes that require no oven, no stovetop, and no heat in the kitchen whatsoever. You will learn how to feed your family well without warming up the house. You just worked so hard to cool down. Hit the subscribe button so you do not miss that discussion. Until then, open your windows to the night air at sundown. Seal them tight at sunrise. Hang a wet sheet in the hot window with a bowl of water beneath it. And remember that the simple physics of water and cloth has not changed once in 4,000 years. The builders of Persian wind towers understood it. The grandmothers of the old valleys understood it. And now you have remembered it too. That is how the careful old folks lived through summers, far harder than the one outside your window today, and that is how it is still done in any home that chooses to remember. Let us go deeper into the fine adjustments of these systems, because a master craftsman knows that the difference between a tool that works and a tool that excels lies entirely in the details. When you begin using water and fabric to alter the climate of your living room, you will eventually run into variables that the high school physics books do not map out. You must know how to read your house, your wind, and your water. Understand this. Not all water is the same when it comes to long-term passive cooling. If you are drawing water from a city tap that is heavily treated with chlorine and dissolved lime, or if your well runs through deep limestone shelves, you will notice that after 4 or 5 days of continuous evaporation, your cotton sheets will begin to feel stiff to the touch. They will develop a faint, white crust along the lower hem where the water evaporates most intensely. Those are mineral deposits, calcium and magnesium left behind when the liquid transitions into vapor stop. And think about what that crust does. It plugs the tiny microscopic pores between the cotton threads. It turns your breathable evaporative screen into a stiff, calcified wall that blocks the breeze. Our grandmothers solved this without chemicals or store-bought softeners. Every 2 or 3 days, take the sheet down and submerge it in a bucket of water mixed with 2 cups of plain white vinegar. Let it sit for 10 minutes. The mild acid breaks down the mineral bonds instantly, leaving the cotton soft, porous, and ready to drink water again. Rinse it once in clear water and hang it right back up. You must also choose the exact right weave of cotton. Many folks go to their linen closets and pull out the thickest, heaviest Egyptian cotton bath towel they own, thinking that more water means more cooling. That is a mistake. A towel that is too dense holds too much water and acts like a heavy blanket. It chokes the wind, preventing the cross breeze from pushing the cooled air into the room. On the other hand, a cheap cheesecloth or a synthetic mesh lets the air pass through too quickly without picking up the moisture. The ideal material is an old, well-worn muslin sheet, a linen flour sack towel, or a standard cotton bed sheet with a low thread count, somewhere around 150 to 200 threads per inch. When you hold the dry fabric up to the light, you should see a clear, visible grid of tiny pinpricks between the threads. That grid is where the magic happens. It allows the air to fracture into thousands of tiny streams as it passes through, maximizing the contact between the moving air and the wet fibers without stopping the momentum of the breeze. Now, let us troubleshoot the wind itself. Nature does not always provide a steady 4-mile-per-hour breeze exactly when the afternoon sun is at its hottest. There will be days when the air outside is completely still, hanging heavy and hot over your roof. On those dead days, a passive sheet in a window will only cool the immediate 6 inches around the fabric. You must assist the system. If you do not use electricity at all, you can take advantage of what our builders call the chimney effect. If you open a window in your cool, dark basement and simultaneously open an attic hatch or a high window on the second floor, the warm air upstairs will naturally rise and escape through the roof. As that hot air exits the top of the house, it creates a low-pressure vacuum that pulls the cool earth air up from the basement through the living spaces. If you place your wet sheet over the basement window where the air is being drawn into the house, you accelerate this natural draft, creating a continuous, self-powering loop of cool air moving upward through your floorboards. If you do use a small amount of electricity, this is where a single low-wattage box fan becomes your best friend. Do not set the fan to blow outward through the wet sheet. Instead, place the fan 3 feet behind the sheet, inside the room, pulling the air through the wet fabric towards you. This creates a gentle negative pressure across the entire surface of the cotton, ensuring that every cubic inch of air entering your room is washed clean of its heat by the moisture. A standard box fan uses about 40 watts of power on its lowest setting. Compare that to the 3,500 watts your central AC compressor devours every single hour it runs. You are getting 80% of the relief for less than 1% of the electrical cost. Let us speak also of managing the moisture in the house over long periods. Folks often ask me, Elias, if I am constantly evaporating gallons of water inside my home, will I not create a damp, moldy environment? This is where the lockdown rhythm saves you. Remember, you are only running the evaporative setups during the bone-dry heat of the midday afternoon, and you are doing it in rooms that have active cross-ventilation. The air is constantly moving out of the house, carrying the spent moisture with it. Then at sundown, you open the entire house to the dry night air, clearing out any residual humidity that accumulated during the day. We have run these methods in houses with exposed white oak timbers for 300 years, and our wood remains as dry and sound as the day it was hewn. The secret is the rhythm. Moisture and movement by day, complete clearing by night. Look at the tools you now possess. You know how to read the minerals in your water, how to select the perfect muslin weave, how to command the chimney effect when the wind dies down, and how to balance the moisture in your timbers. These are not isolated survival tricks. This is a complete, coherent philosophy of shelter that works with the planet instead of trying to brute force it with machinery. You are no longer helpless at the mercy of a